Hey, I'm Roberto, uncle, dreamer, and Disney kid at heart. As a business profit strategist and community leader, I've had the chance to work with multiple business owners and community leaders ranging from napkin ideas to 8-figure brands. And along the way, there's been some failures, amazing successes, and lots of friendships have been born. Now, community leaders come from all walks of life and business. They might identify as a coach, consultant, speaker, a nonprofit leader, or a maker, but here's the thing. They all have one thing in common. They are purpose-driven brands and leaders seeking to create an even bigger impact in the world with and for their communities. This is the show that brings together community leaders and business leaders with communities to reveal their mistakes and successes to building and creating a highly impactful and profitable community. This is the Connected Community Leader Podcast. Well, hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode where today we're going to have a conversation with Avani Parekh. Now, listen, when I first met Avani, I was just like, who is this lovely ball of amazing awesomeness and badassery that nobody actually knows about? Because if y'all been following the show or hanging out in some of our communities, y'all know that we love to connect with other like-minded individuals and leaders that truly can see themselves as that community CEO. And so Avani is one of those amazing people who leads with integrity and authenticity. And she has over 12 years of experience in building online and offline communities and really helping them be able to develop creative funding strategies, raising awareness about social issues and mobilizing grassroots movements and shifting paradigms that are really built into our societies. And now, y'all, she works at this little company called Facebook. Y'all may or may not have heard of it. And she actually works with community leaders across North America to help them build safe spaces where their communities can thrive and feel a sense of belonging. So Avani, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's like talking to my brother, so it's all good.
Hey, I love that. That's how I feel about when we get to sit down and chat and communicate. And for those of y'all that are here for our conversation, know that it's probably going to be a little bit like a brother and sister talking. Like if y'all ever saw the Disney movie Up, like we might have a few of those moments where we're just like squirrel and we might take off down a path we didn't intend, but I promise we will come back. And so Avani, I guess, I got to know you a little bit. We got to have dinner in San Francisco, hang out, and I love to let people get to know you. And so who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, I would call myself like a bleeding heart liberal with sort of like a nerd streak. Somebody once introduced me to this phrase, heart farmer, not headhunter. And I immediately took to it and thought, this is who I am. I can see that my role on this earth is not to fit into a exploitative capitalist system, but it's to help develop and grow the potential of other human beings purely by just showing up. And I didn't really understand that until now. But now that I'm a woman of a certain age, I feel like I can claim my position on this earth. So that's what I'm going to do with lots of confidence instead of false humility. So I don't know where to start because I feel like I have such a crazy journey and lots of different dots have connected in my life to lead me where I am today. But long story short, I think, as a kid, I was an only child but I always longed for community. I felt like an outcast. And that comes from things that we can talk about later, like deep trauma. So I don't want to glaze over that, but that deserves its own discussion. So I would do things like, have puppet shows and charge all the kids in my neighborhood 25 cents or make bracelets and sell those or all kinds of like crazy things. I remember I went through a phase of making things out of salt dough. It's like this dough that you make out of flour, salt, and water. And then you add food coloring and you bake it and you make stuff. And my parents had like this little Indian store in our house. And so I would sell these things to all the customers and they would buy them. And so there's something entrepreneurial about me, even from a really early age. And I think building on that, when I grew up, I just became aware of my ability to feel, I thought I was really sensitive, and everyone around me thought I was really sensitive. But I was actually feeling other people's feelings, and that's like my intuitive power. And growing up, and as I went into high school and later into college, I wanted to do international development, and I thought I wanted to be a diplomat. And so I'm from North Carolina, so here I am. I'm an Indian American, born and raised in the U.S., but my parents were immigrants that came from India in the 70s. And in North Carolina, you could either be black or white. They didn't really understand brown. So I felt like I had to choose, which was also like really interesting. Another thing to double click on in terms of identity and where we decide to stake our claim in the world. But anyway, moving into college, I felt this deep responsibility to like try and solve the problems of the world, and thought that I could do that via international development and political science. So I studied that, moved into sort of like working at the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation. And then I was still in the US at that time. And I was like, I had like this wanderlust. I wanted to get out. And I hadn't really been abroad that much, like even to India. Usually Indian kids that grow up outside of India, their parents go and visit every year. But I went to India when I was 2 years old, and then didn't go back until I was 21, and I studied abroad in college. So I felt this like deep, this deep connection to India, but I wanted to sort of get out of the country. So there were a couple of opportunities that fell short because the global SARS pandemic hit. So I thought I was going to be a teacher, teaching English in China, until I saw all the distress messages like, get me the F out of here. Like,
You're
get
like,
me the F
deuce.
out of here. Yeah, bye. And so changing course, had an opportunity through some people who were in my local community in Charlotte, North Carolina, to go to India to build this platform where we were channelizing diaspora funds and volunteerism to really innovative social projects that were going on. And like any kid of an immigrant knows that our parents have this deep desire to make change in their home country, but they oftentimes don't know how to vet opportunities. So they give to traditional things like schools and hospitals or religious institutions that may or may not steward their funding well. Their funding or their time. And so the idea was, can we surface some really innovative social innovators that were working in my home state of Gujarat, which is in northwestern India. So went there and spent a couple of years there trying to build that platform. Had my first failure as an entrepreneur because it was way too damn early. They were, you're trying to build this online platform for, to send funds and to lift information. But in India, that infrastructure wasn't there. People were just doing Yahoo chatting and still in like these cyber cafes. Not very many people had computers at home. So it was maybe, I'd say about 6 or 7 years too early, and learned a valuable lesson about timing. But that opportunity allowed me to meet so many really incredible, like, people making change on the ground, like grassroots activists who believed in the tenets of Gandhi, who were just working in one village without electricity. So you go and visit them, you take like a 6-hour bus, then you're in a rickety Jeep going up a mountain, and you get to the village, there's no electricity. You take a bath and you wash your clothes in the river. And at night you sit in the dark with one flashlight and you sing songs, and that's how you entertain yourself. So my time in India was really precious and really eye-opening. One part of this was sort of going from the state where I was at in one corner of India all the way to the southern corner, state of Tamil Nadu, that got hit by the Pacific tsunami. And we worked in the villages that were sort of debilitated by the tsunami. And I tell this story a lot, but it's like this, you have these stories that stick out in your mind of these experiences in your life. And the women of that village had lost their husbands to the tsunami, right? They were fishermen. And so they were pulled out to sea. And we took them to the ocean side for the first time since the tsunami hit. It had maybe been a year and a half and they hadn't gone back. And so walking with them hand in hand, there's this image of like two of their kids in either arm, and they're laughing at me because I don't know their language, and they're trying to teach me words like brother and sister in their language. And so we start singing a song out of the two words that I know and slowly make our way to the ocean. And it was a moment of great sadness, but also the ocean gives that village life. They're fishermen. It is bread and butter. And so your livelihood depends on this thing that also caused you great pain. And it was an incredible moment. So India was really transformative, came back to the US, worked in the nonprofit sector. I was in community, like basically community development corporations and credit unions at that time, raising capital for credit unions. Ask me how I got that job, Roberto. Let me tell you, it's because to go to India, I had fundraised and raised $19,000 from my local Indian community before I went to India. And so banking on that fundraising experience, I mean, $19,000 was a lot of money for me back then. I got this job as a fundraiser for an organization that supported community development credit unions. And these are financial institutions started by mainly Black people in the 50s and 60s because they didn't have access to credit. And then later on, the Latino community credit union was formed, and so we also supported them. So we were just raising money for them and trying to design statewide programs like financial literacy. And then by serendipity, because in my building of my of that job was the statewide coalition for domestic violence. I made friends with some of the ladies that were working at the coalition against domestic violence, and then got pulled into an effort to raise money for an organization that had gone defunct in our community that served South Asian victims of domestic violence. So we got together in coalition and wrote the grant for that organization. And I also became the co-director, one of the first paid staff, along with somebody who I really admire, who was my co-director with me. And we took different sides of the organization. I took the community building, fundraising, awareness raising, all of that stuff. And she took the counseling and sort of some of the things that you needed to do to help survivors of domestic violence basically heal. And so that was my first foray into working in gender-based violence. So did that and sort of stayed in the sector for 8 years. In between, left and went to Kenya and did a Kiva fellowship with microfinance, and then came back. And then you'll learn that I applied for all these fellowships in my life. I believe in applying for everything and getting people to pay you to have the experiences that you want to have. So that's Avni's rule number one, is apply for all the things and get your experiences through opportunities where people pay you or encourage you or connect you to the things that you want to be connected to. Anywho, so came back from Kenya, stuck around a little bit, got another fellowship to work as a sort of like a skilled professional with an impact investor called LGT Venture Philanthropy. And so they set me up with a tuberculosis organization in India. So I headed back to India in 2012. And not going to lie, hated the organization that I was at. They did really good work, but hierarchical nonprofit organizations are just not my bag. And so while they had this incredible impact in the world, I didn't find the organization to be really healthy for me. And so at the same time, I was sort of new to India as an adult, right? Sort of like a fully fledged adult. And I was missing my social entrepreneurship community. So we created the Delhi Social Entrepreneurship Meetup, a few friends and I. So we used to do monthly meetings and meetups and have mastermind community mapping sessions and monthly events. And we had a Facebook group and all that kind of stuff. And so that was fun. I did that on the side. And then it was 2012, and sort of December of 2012, there was this really horrible gang rape case that happened in India, in New Delhi, in the city that I lived. And if you know India, you know that anytime you would open a newspaper, you would see rape, rape. rape, like page after page. And you eventually become numb to hearing about sexual violence because it happens all the time. Every single day in the newspaper, there's something new. But the story of this girl, her name was Jyoti Singh, but the case was called the Nirbhaya case because they weren't using her real name for a little while. She was just like a normal girl. She was, I believe, a dental student. She was with a friend. You know, she wasn't alone. She was in a nice part of town. It was 8 p.m. and she was brutally gang raped, and she ended up succumbing to the violence of that act. And India just went up in arms. People took to the streets. They protested. It was like, from what I understand, the first mass citizen outpouring of people protesting for women's safety. And so many people were like literally galvanized by that moment, including me. And because of my background in domestic violence, I was like, you know, in India, there's no sex education, right? There's no models for healthy relationships. And I'm not saying arranged marriage is bad, but when you're not choosing or dating, you don't know, you don't go through that painful process it takes to find the right partner. And dating apps were starting to get popular. And so I was like, how can you know about rape if you don't know about healthy relationships and healthy sex, right?
Right.
You don't understand the sovereignty that you have over your own body, or you actually don't have any sovereignty over your own body if you don't understand these things. So ended up with some friends participating in a startup weekend. It was literally like 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave India. This rape case was happening. People were in an uproar. We had this entrepreneurship competition, the startup weekend, and I was supposed to be volunteering, but I ended up putting myself in line and pitching an idea for a counseling platform that I called Love Doctor. I didn't even know what I was doing. I just like stood in line and then somehow got up the courage. It's not strange.
And I want to stop here real quick.
Yeah.
And I one of the things that I want to like interject here real quick, and you know, as you're listening to this, I want to invite you to like listen. You know, Avni's actually dropped a few nuggets that y'all need to write down. Right. So like she said, Avni's rule number one is apply for all the things and get experience through opportunities. But another thing that, you know, there's just kind of a pattern here as she's sharing is that, you know, one of the things that I see community leaders do so often, and I know that you've seen this too, is that so many of them lead with a heart only without a business plan behind it. And so even hearing you talk about going into this startup meeting, you're just like, okay, I'm gonna start this thing called Love Doctor. I'm pitching this. I'm doing this because I know that there's a problem over here, but I see the possibility of funding to be able to see that problem. And you've had this ability to understand that it takes profits, it takes money, it takes funds to be able to do the meaningful work that we're called to do. And I think that's extremely important to call out here, is that even when you were back with like the community development groups, and you know, you talked about raising your initial first 19K and then working with these groups, you had your purpose, you had the calling, there's this meaningful work. And you always went into it with, how am I paying for it, or who is paying for it? And so it wasn't always charity, but that you had this ability to understand that leaders can have meaning and money at the same time. I think that's important for people to hear.
Leaders can have meaning and money at the same time, but I think we have to deprogram ourselves from the limitations that we place on how much our work is worth. So I've certainly, coming to Facebook has really opened my eyes to what my skills are worth in this world. I mean, in a corporate setting, it's like a different situation, but should I go back out into the world, I'm not going to be shy about asking for what I want and more, right? I'm going to build myself a contingency cushion. I feel like being able to talk about my impact in a significant way is important. Like, you got to play the game, and until we develop a new game. right? We're in the process of doing that, but you got to play that game. So like I learned that like the hard way, even within the walls of Facebook, is I can say that I'm doing something flowery for Black and brown communities, and that's where my heart lies. But unless I can make the case for how those communities are showing up on our platforms and how we're under investing with them and what their spend is and like how much time they're investing, no one's going to care. So learning how to make the case was important. And I think those experiences taught me that. So once I pitched that and was in that competition, I came back to the US for a year. Actually, no, after that, I went to Kenya for 6 weeks and did a contracting project with a biogas company. So I went back to Kenya. I love East Africa and can see myself working there again somewhere in the future. So went back and sort of, became a consultant in the things that I now knew how to do as an expert, which is really interesting. And then came back to the US, sort of got a job at a local domestic violence agency, ran a coalition where we got funding for the Coalition for Immigrant Victims of Domestic Violence. And then after a year and some change left and headed back to India, where a friend just said, listen, if you can get yourself on a plane, I have a place where you can stay. He had like a co-working, co-living place. And so for the first 3 or 4 months that I was in India, he took the pressure of a roof over my head. And I'll be forever grateful to him. And he was also like sort of the co-signator when I registered the business of Love Doctor in India. And so I think like what was interesting is going back and then like starting to work on this idea. I'm a big believer in, and I think this is a fatal flaw. So like full transparency. I don't like to plan things. I like to try things. So I know I need to strike a balance in these two things, but I started the counseling service by tweeting, by basically buying like a cheap Android phone and a SIM card, getting a phone number, tweeting our number and saying sex and relationship counseling confidential on Twitter through a new Twitter account using all the hashtags. And I did that for a day. And on day 2, we got our first client on WhatsApp.
So I want to unpack that for a second. And y'all are probably realizing that Avni's a wealth of knowledge, and that we might have to have her back and do another episode with her, because I think we're definitely going to. So one of the things that I hear community leaders say quite often, and this is online or even like in person at events, is, you don't understand. I can't do this because of X. And it's whatever story they've told themselves, or I like to say whatever story somebody gifted upon them that they decided to open and receive. And I want y'all to hear that she literally set up a new Twitter account, send out some tweets with the right hashtags, because as a leader, it's important to know how to communicate what way and which platform, because every platform is different. And that on day 2, they got their first client. Yet we live in a space where we have so many leaders who will plan 6, 9, 12, 18 months, 4 years, and be like, well, I just can't do it because I don't have X. And so you may call that your fatal flaw, that you don't like to plan, you like to try. I also think that that's the quickest way to get to an MVP, to get your minimum viable product.
Absolutely.
At like extremely low overhead, and you're like, cool, prove the model, let's go. Like somebody wanted it.
Absolutely. We immediately got clients from all over the globe, right? So it was free, and I was just testing the model. Like, will people come to something that they haven't vetted because they hear that the service, and yeah, tons of people came. The first people that came into the WhatsApp were Arabic speaking clients, and I had no idea. So we would translate, and I would Google Translate back and forth. And then built a chat platform, which was just a simple chat plugin on a website. Had my first counselor that I paid with a stipend, which was 5,000 rupees, which was nothing, but people believed in the concept. And so then slowly grew to 5 or 6, and then had psychology interns that would intern with us and did all this stuff. And this is all super easy, like in the sense that I could have easily not even had the chat platform, and just used Facebook and Messenger to run my search. Hindsight's 2020, so I'm realizing all this stuff. We did use Facebook. We used WhatsApp extensively. Most of our clients came through WhatsApp. And then, did a couple of years doing that, was navigating the investment space. How do I get investment for this? How do I get paid? Partnered with a dating app to be like the expert. So I know that you talk about this a lot, but it was a decision that I had to make. And is Love Doctor going to be about me and my face, or are we going to be a brand? Right. So it could have easily been a coaching model with a funnel and getting paid clients, or how do we want to run it? Now, I chose to do it the other way. I think the interesting thing is I had 10 years of nonprofit experience. I could have just spun it up as a nonprofit and gotten funds for it and had some paid services. In hindsight, I would have done all that, but it was an interesting foray into sort of launching a social enterprise that was a for-profit business and figuring out how to do that. And so I think we ended up serving, through our chat line, 40,000 people that I can count. There's a time when we weren't counting. We also did this campaign on Snapchat called Snap Counselors that was for teen dating violence that went viral. So lesson here is, all the free platforms can be used and exploited for you to build solutions on, as long as you're really savvy with understanding how to message, and understand where your target market is, especially if you're trying to affect change. And Snapchat was free. And, we had a little bit of help because one of our partners was from a PR agency, but, it went viral globally. It was this really, really interesting time. And so as I started sort of getting burnt out and losing money, I was looking for investors. I sort of had 3 roads ahead of me. There was a shady investor that was sexually harassing me that said he was going to give me $100K to build brick and mortar counseling centers. There was an accelerator that I had actually already signed up for that was going to take 30% equity of my business and then do all the accelerator things that an accelerator would do. And then I could have linked up with somebody through a strategic partnership or get acquired. And so as I was exploring these options, the first 2 options, definitely didn't want to continue to get sexually harassed by the investor. Luckily, I had literally just signed the paperwork for the accelerator, and so I was able to back out because I got a bad feeling. They later on folded and sort of went out of business in India. And then through a set of serendipitous moments, I had a mentor who was running a really big women's platform called Sheroes. And she just started calling me and supporting me and shouting me out on Twitter and inviting me to her events. And her name's Sairi. So she set me up with one of her angel investors because he'd been investing in people that she knew. I had a conversation with him. He's like, you have something, but I'm not really sure about the revenue model. And he wasn't a patient capital type of investor. Now I know about those. So I could have waited it out, but I was a different person then. And so when I had the conversation with him, I think what he did is he went back to Sairi and said, she's got something, you guys need to join forces. So I ended up joining forces with this women's platform that was primarily focusing on employment-related counseling for women, and Love Doctor was doing life and relationships and sexual health and all that stuff. And so came to her, and that's where I got my online community manager chops for real, because we sort of seeded their counseling helpline, which they had, but we made processes and procedures and expanded it, and built sort of the first 30 communities on the Sheroes platform that was just for women, primarily women in India, these who were disenfranchised online, who are victimized and subjugated online. Facebook wasn't safe for them. So her business premise was that we're going to build something for ourselves. We're going to build the internet for women. And so stuck around there and did some really good work with them for 2 years, and exploited my privilege of being an American accented Indian woman who speaks well and has a good stage presence as well. So I got a lot of mic time in addition to doing the community building. And we did so many things, like in the scaling of those communities. We built advisory circles for each of the communities. We monetized them for the first time. So by the time I was sort of in thinking of, I never really planned to transition out of there, but by the time it was my time to transition out of there, the love and relationships community, which we started, which was the legacy of Love Doctor, was the first community to get monetized on the Shira's platform. And so I saw how we pitched, came alongside them, talked to the brands about the power of community and what we were doing. And so it felt really good when I was leaving. And Facebook was a fluke. I just happened to be at a meeting that Facebook was holding in New Delhi for community leaders. And they said, hey, we're hiring across APAC. And so I just took the person in the corner and I said, oh, I'm a community leader and here's all the things that I've done. And she said, I'll get back to you. And like a week later, she rolled into my inbox and I sent her my CV. And 2.5 months later, I'm on a plane to California for my orientation. So just happened just like that, but it wasn't planned. And here I am now thinking about, what's the impact I want to make on the world now, right? With all of this experience.
There's some great nuggets in there too. And so everybody, I hope, as you're listening along, that y'all are like me. I'm like a religious note taker. Like I probably take way more notes than I should, but some things that like popped out to me in that last section were the importance of meeting people where they're at, even if you're not comfortable in that space. And so, you talked about, hey, there's all these free platforms out there. And even if you're not comfortable on that platform, if that's where your user is, build your community where the people you want to serve are, not always where you're the most comfortable, is one of the things that I took away that's extremely important there. Because I know that a lot of people are just like, I have to build a Facebook group for everything. Well, if your people are on LinkedIn, build on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And, that's one of the things that, I truly love about community, online and offline. If your people are offline, build offline. And even right now, like as of the recording of this episode, when we're in the middle of this global health crisis, that you have the opportunity to build online to then be able to go offline and build these hybrids. And another thing that you said that was key was the importance of collaborations and partnerships, and realizing that as a community leader, when you build, you don't have to do everything alone. And so, when you talked about, hey, Love Doctor's here, option 1 was like, yeah, no, not going to do that. Option 2 was like, I feel bad. And option 3 was like, hey, like, let's explore this. And that collaboration is like what has led to, now that you've moved on, your legacy continues through that work because of the time that you've put in. And one other big thing that I want to invite everybody to hear is the importance of knowing who you serve, who you don't serve, and being able to niche that down into something clear. And so when you talked about Shiro's, one of the things I love that you said is you said, how do we build the internet for women? Mm. And I think that so many community leaders can say like, well, I'm going to build the community for people who, y'all, and I'm not making fun of people. I'm just trying to think of the most random thing that's not random, because I'm like looking up my floor and there's dog toys everywhere. And so it's just like, people be like, I'm going to build the community for people who love dog toys. And y'all, that's great, but like, what type of dog toys? And are they like German Shepherd dog toys, or are they like teacup Yorkie dog toys? Because those are two completely different types of toys, because like the German Shepherd is going to see the teacup Yorkie and be like, that looks like a squishy ball. And y'all know I love animals. Like that's not meant to be mean. What I want you to hear is that there's the importance of the niche. And so that even within them saying, we want to build the internet for women, we're going to do it with, they built 30 communities initially within that. And so there's the importance of knowing who we serve and how to serve them. And so, talking about that, right, I would say a question I'm fascinated about is, we've got a few minutes left here together, is what would you say was the biggest mistake you made in building communities online and offline? And you didn't know it then, but now you look at it and you're just like, man, this is the lesson that I learned from that is going to help me for probably the rest of my life, that other community leaders could learn from.
Oh man, I have a big one. The first one is that I felt like the work that I was doing in India was dangerous, and that it was going to get me in trouble. I mean, the Indian politics, the way they are, and with sex and relationships being taboo, I played small for way too long. And I'm really good at speaking. I'm really good at making a case. I'm really good at convincing people. I'm really good at partnerships. I'm pretty good at raising money. And I played small and scared for maybe the first year of launching this service and tried to hide and be behind the scenes. And my lesson is that if you're going to commit to something, commit to doing it all the way. Like, don't be namby-pamby about making a change in the world, because you're just going to end up screwing yourself, right? I could have helped so many more people with the service and probably made some money way quicker if I would have not been scared. And the second thing is that anything worth doing is worth being scared of, right? Like, if it's really gonna make a difference in this world, it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be really effing scary. And so as long as you're okay with that, like, these are things that we should anticipate now. None of it's going to feel comfortable. And so now I see how there's a part of me that holds myself back, and the voice that I use with myself when I'm convincing myself not to do something. And in this moment, as we speak today, while we sit across from each other on this video screen, my work in making myself a more effective change agent is learning how to be compassionate to myself first. And so, the lesson is maybe not be scared, but the deeper lesson there is what goes on behind the curtain shows up on stage. If you're scared, it's going to show up in your work. If you're doubtful, it's going to show up in your work. If you don't believe in yourself, it's going to show up in your work. And so you have to either fully believe it, or you need to do the work on yourself before you go out and try to help anyone else. It's not going to work.
Yeah. And, and speaking of doing work on yourself, I personally believe that the people that lead should always be learning. I believe that if we're not continually learning, that we cannot continually grow to be able to lead the people that we lead. And so what would be either one or two books or podcasts that you love for your own development, or just that you love that you think community leaders should read or listen?
Yeah. I mean, I am, so I've been fascinated, and this is like more about personal development, self-development. There's a doctor named Gabor Mate, and I think that many community leaders have dealt with trauma. I think that we manifest our pain into solutions for others because we heal ourselves through working for others. And so Dr. Mate talks about, one of his books is When the Body Says No. And then he has another book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is about addiction. But he basically says that anywhere where you're not saying no in your life and you're allowing injustice or boundary stomping or whatever to occur is where you're going to feel physical and psychological pain. And it's a little new agey, but I'm seeing how, for me, the continuum of some things that were unhealed showed up in the way that I worked in the world and made me an ineffective leader. I got around it because maybe I'm lucky, I'm intelligent, I'm articulate, so I got around it. But was I as effective as I could have been at, when I was 27, 35 to where I am now? Hell no. So the gifts of COVID and this period of silence have been deep introspection and realizing where I'm not showing up, particularly not showing up for myself. And so I find his work to be really interesting. And there's lots of talks of his on YouTube. They're very long, so you can piecemeal them. But I think his work is really neat because I think we're all a special form of light workers, people who bring people together in these moments where there's loneliness and sadness. This is God's work, right? It's elevated like that. It's important for us to show up and come correct. So definitely him. And I'd say, um, what was this? Yeah, I read this book. So I'm really extroverted, as are you, and but I'm becoming an ambivert. I mean, I'm slowly sort of, as I age, becoming slightly more introverted. I'm needing more time. I'm needing more space for reflection and downtime. The extroversion around people that aren't my people is taking more out of me. So I'm learning to discern the spaces. If they're my people, I'm going to talk to you for like 97 hours and it's not going to take anything. But if you're not my people and if it feels forced, I can no longer manufacture energy from those spaces. So I read this book called I'm Sorry. It's on my Kindle. I'm sorry I'm late. I didn't want to come, I think is the name of the book. And I'm forgetting the name of the
I love that
author.
name.
But it's the journey of a woman who's incredibly introverted and she moves to London from Shanghai. And she's like, how the F do I make friends? And so she tries all of these things to get herself over. Not that introversion is something to get over, but introversion that prevents her from making connections with others, especially in a town like London, right? Because Londoners are like very suspect. They're not like Americans. Hey, how you doing? How's the weather? How's your dog? Oh, it's so lovely. They don't do that. They look down upon that actually with disdain. And so she's navigating around that. And she doesn't know how to connect to people. And so she forces herself to do all of these exercises so that she can meet people and make connections. She goes to a book club meeting, she goes to networking events. Like it starts really small. She uses like Bumble BFF. She then graduates to doing an improv theater class. Then she graduates to doing stand-up comedy. If you've ever done stand-up comedy, it's really hard. Like I consider myself to be naturally funny, but stand-up comedy was really hard for me because you have to write it down. And as we know, I don't like to plan. Um, and then her final thing is bringing all of these people that she met from the various exercises that she did to meet people to her house for a house party. And that's like the denouement of the book. And I loved it so much because it's an insight into a different type of personality. These are the types of personalities that show up in online communities because you have the screen protecting you. So introverts can show up really fully because there's a bit of a barrier there. And so it gave me such insight into the difficulty that people may feel in showing up, sharing, being a part of a community. And I think it was really important in terms of me building additional empathy for any community that I build in the future. It's not
Okay.
easy for people.
No, it's not. And it's y'all, I actually looked it up. So the book's called Sorry I'm Late. I Didn't Want to Come, An Introvert's Year of Living Dangerously. And it's by Jessica Pan. And so I'm actually going to add that to my reading list, y'all. And here's why. So as Avani said, most people actually think that I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert. And it has been through being a leader and being a public speaker. And, in some years, literally speaking on over 100 stages a year, I have learned how to be able to communicate and be upfront, but I still process as an introvert. And so even if I train a 3-day event with like I said, my people, right? Like our students, our clients, the people that get it, I will literally spend a week in bed after the event because it takes me that much time to just deconnect and to recharge and refuse. And I love the work. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, okay, they're like, oh, a person wants it. No, nobody wants to come. No, bye. Y'all need to go over there. And so it's really been a journey for myself and growth. And one of the books that helped me do that was and y'all listen to the podcast, y'all have heard this before, maybe. I don't know, because I talk about this book to everybody. Was actually the Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. And that was another amazing book. And so I guess in closing today, 2 questions. One, I think we need to have you back. And I think that, would you love to come back and have us share a conversation about empathy in community leaders? I think that that would be a
Yes.
fun topic. Okay, so y'all, Avni's going to be back. Y'all heard it here. I don't know when. We're going to make it happen. And then in closing today, um, I'm going to go two different directions here. And y'all are used to hearing me say like, hey, what's last words here that you have? And I'm going to do this from two different perspectives. Um, Actually, I'm not. I'm going to do this from one perspective. And while this will apply to everybody, whatever Avni says, I'm going to ask the question in a little bit different way. So, Avni, you and I share a great passion about seeing underserved and underrepresented leaders step up and rise. And whether those are Black or Brown people or Indigenous people or people of the LGBT community. And, while we love everybody, we realize that there's underserved and underrepresented communities and these leaders that are saying, how do I make my mark? How
Yeah.
do I rise to have some of the other opportunities that other people have? What parting words would you have for community leaders that come from those underserved, underrepresented communities that say, I'm ready? What words of advice would you have for them to keep moving forward?
This is a deep question, and I resonate with this so much because I too had this like deep need to feel seen, and it's really chicken and egg. Once you start showing up sincerely, people see you. You have to start, right? So if you're hiding yourself and in planning phase and you're not showing up in the world, you're not going to get seen, you're not going to leave your mark. And if you're not trying things and experimenting and giving yourself those learning opportunities, you're also not going to make your mark. So for me, it's just start whatever you think is your hypothesis for how you want to create change and how you want to build communities. Just start with 2 people, start with 5 people, start with 10 people, because the longer it takes for you to iterate and to like learn those lessons, the less opportunity you are really going to have to make that mark that you want to make, right? So for me, it's been the hunger is only satiated when I start something. If I feel that I have this deep need to be seen, I need to start showing up and doing something first, and then it all falls into place. So I don't know. That's what I would say. That's been my learning for this time.
I love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all for joining Avni and me today for a conversation about, well, a little bit of everything when it comes to building communities. And I hope that you were able to write down those nuggets. We'll have Avni back in a few episodes to talk about empathy. Y'all have a great day. Hey, y'all, if y'all haven't told anyone about the podcast, be sure to tell them about the podcast. Watch it over on YouTube as well. And we'll chat with y'all very soon. Bye-bye.